focus on mindfulness today because, you know, when you see those people that have really good bodies, like you can tell they've worked out, they are so fit and strong, and you're like, man, I wish I had a body like that. And then sometimes, and mind you, not as often, I meet people that are so calm and so present to the moment. They're really listening to what you have to say, and they're really focused, and you can tell that they've just got this presence. And it always makes me stop and think and be like, man, how did they get to be that way? What does it take? Like, we hear so often how to train our body, how to turn up, but what about our mind? Like, it just seems like it's something we need to start prioritizing. It's on par with eating well and exercising and getting enough sleep, but it's so easy to put to the side, right? Because the inner work, it's so hard, and maybe we see it, but I don't know, maybe we don't get that external validation as much because it's not as physically obvious. And I want to understand that more, and that's what this video is all about.
The definition of mindfulness varies. The American Psychological Association defines mindfulness as a moment-to-moment awareness of one's experience without judgment. In this sense, mindfulness is a state and not a trait. While it might be promoted by certain practices or activities, such as meditation, it is not equivalent to or synonymous with them. Dr. Daniel Siegel, a professor of clinical psychiatry, defines mindfulness in its most general sense is about waking up from a life on automatic and being sensitive to novelty in our everyday experiences. Instead of being on automatic and mindless, mindfulness helps us awaken, and by reflecting on the mind, we are enabled to make choices, and thus change becomes possible. Then my own mum, a clinical psychologist, she calls mindfulness attention training. She says it is the act of focusing your attention on something like the breath. Then every time your mind wanders away, which she says it can do often, mindfulness is about noticing this and then bringing our attention back to the present moment. It is like a muscle in our mind that needs to be trained.
Anyway, Eckhart Tolle begins his book, The Power of Now, with this really, really great line. He says, "I have little use for the past, and I rarely think about it." It blew my mind when I read that, because I think about the past a lot. But anyway, he then goes on to talk about how up until he was 30, he struggled a lot with anxiety and periods of suicidal depression. It just leaves you thinking, his story must be very interesting to get to that point in his life and then overcome it. What did he do? How did he do it? He describes reaching this moment when he realized that he could no longer live with himself. He was in that much agony. And with this realization, it dawned on him that there's an I and a self. And I guess what he alludes to here is that the I exists in the here and now, and that the self is our own creation, accumulating from our past ruminations and recollections and future worries and ambitions. He basically describes that being fully conscious of the present moment is living with no thought. I don't know what it's like to live like this, but I know that this is the point I'd like to get to. And if I was telling Eckhart Tolle this, he'd probably say to me, you have it in yourself already. The problem is your mind is making too much noise. He's not wrong. That's what's so great about mindfulness, and that's why I want to keep practicing. I want to get to that point where I am just still and my mind is clear and at peace. So, yeah. One day I'm gonna get there. It's gonna be great. It's just little steps by little steps, and that's what's so great about mindfulness. That's why I just want to keep practicing it. It really, really inspires me.
So I finished reading The Power of Now, and these are a few things that stood out. Firstly, being present isn't something we should try and understand. It exists within us, and only when our attention is fully and intensely in the now, being can be felt, but never understood. Secondly, the greatest obstacle to being in the present is identifying with your mind. This causes thought to become compulsive. These are the voices in your head, the ongoing commentary. Eckhart Tolle calls out philosopher Descartes' most famous words, "I think, therefore I am," arguing this is the most basic error, that we have a choice, but we are addicted to listening to our thoughts because they're driven by our ego. Thirdly, to alleviate your mind from thinking, Eckhart Tolle argues that you can tap into your consciousness by beginning to pay attention to what you're telling yourself. Eckhart says, thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. You witness your thoughts and emotions and reactions to situations. Without judgment, just analyze and observe these processes. Next, realize the delusion of time. To identify with your mind is to be trapped in time, the compulsion to live almost exclusively through memory and anticipation. This creates an endless preoccupation with past and future, and an unwillingness to honor and acknowledge the present moment and allow it to be. To not get stuck in psychological time, you need to ask yourself if there is joy, ease, and lightness in what you're doing. If there isn't, then time is covering up the present moment, and life is perceived as a burden or struggle. Finally, realize the present moment isn't what you think it is. You think about it, the mind can't understand it. To understand presence is being present.
And towards the end of the book, Eckhart Tolle encourages you to try out this experiment. Close your eyes and say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. Then become very alert and wait for that next thought. He argues that as long as you're in a state of intense presence, you're basically free from thought. You're still, but you're also highly alert. The instant that your conscious alertness sinks below a certain level, thought rushes in, the mental noise returns, and the stillness is lost. And in this state, you are back in time. But I've only scratched the surface of Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. I've only briefly captured a few of the chapters. I strongly recommend giving this book a read for your own mental peace and stillness. And as always, you know what? You're probably doing better than you realize. I'm so glad you stuck around to the end of my video, and I'm gonna see you guys soon. Bye!